Hi everyone, welcome. What you see here is the stuff that I plan to feed my two red wiggler worm bins that you see out here on the bench. The stuff in here is pretty routine. It's really nothing more than just some obviously watermelon rinds. The brown stuff is potato peels, and there might be a couple other random stuff mixed in here. This, on the other hand, is a little bit out of the ordinary, something that you don't normally see me feeding. I was over at my mom's yesterday and we were trying to help her organize some of her cupboards and storage shelves down in the basement. And these old breadcrumbs were just, I mean, they don't look that bad and they're dry and they're whatever. I mean, probably still usable, but they're very old. And I guess the main reason for deciding to just do away with them and feed them to the worms is their age. Perhaps there's nothing wrong with them. But either way, it seemed like they were old enough to not chance using them in a dish, but rather dispose of them in a responsible way by giving them to the worms. So I did notice a pretty good sized spider hanging out on the other newspaper that I just removed, and now I'm noticing another one right over here. And right beneath where the spider is, I see a dried up worm covered in mold. Unfortunate little wormy. Well, the spiders are pretty capable of just skedaddling and getting out of harm's way once we get busy in here, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. And as for the cobweb that the spider created, still kind of hanging out over here, that's silk. Silk, just like any other natural fabric, such as wool or cotton, can all be composted in a worm bin. And on the topic of composting fabrics, both of these systems are the systems in which we were composting cotton. I had placed a piece of towel into each of these bins 151 days ago to see how long it takes for the worms to consume the cotton. And even during the previous check-in last time we were in here to feed these little guys 15 days ago, we noticed that there was hardly anything remaining anymore. And we did try to position what remained of the fabric onto a couple of mango seeds that were floating around in here. So I'm just trying to carefully probe down into the system to locate the mango seeds on which we placed what remained of the fabric. And I guess I was sort of pausing there while I was speaking just because of my observance of how damp the material is in these bins. The worms don't mind, they actually like it quite a bit. It's just me that doesn't like having material in my bins that clumps together like this, you know. Well, whatever, let's just get back to the topic at hand here. The remains of the cotton towel appears to only be a little segment of the very edge of the towel where I guess they must use some sort of a non-natural fabric, some sort of a polyester thread to sew the edge of the towel. But the only reason we've been considering this whole composting of fabric test as still ongoing was because each of these threads still appeared to have a tiny fragment of cotton still stuck to them. And I guess what I'm most curious of is whether or not that tiny little remaining bit of cotton still remains. Or has it been consumed by the worms, and can we consider this test as complete? I'm pretty sure that most people would consider the test as complete if you're down to such a tiny fragment of material that you can't even really see it anymore, or you've got to work really hard to try to spot it. So now, on this mango seed would be the other fabric thread, what remains of the towel. Both pieces did seem to have a tiny chunk remaining on them. Tiny little piece of remaining cotton. That's what I think we're seeing right here. I mean, it does seem almost silly to consider this as an ongoing test. Perhaps weeks ago would have been the real time to consider this test as concluded and complete. So I'm wondering if it's even worth continuing on with this whole tracking of the fabric. It is probably fair to say that at this point we can consider these two little threads from those two pieces of cotton towel as the remnants that aren't going to get broken down. Just a little bit of, synthetic material that the worms will never be able to consume. So you know what, let's make it official. Today at 151 days of age, we're going to conclude the fabric composting trials. But yeah, I think if you were to do the same as me, as putting in some cotton fabric into your worm bins, you'd probably see them vanish in about as much time, perhaps sooner. So I've got another bin of mine in which I've been seeing lots and lots of springtails lately, and I did know that I've got other systems where I've been seeing them here and there, and I guess these must be those systems where we've been seeing a little bit of springtail activity. Because as I dig down into the feeding area, I see a lot of little white specks. Even when we opened up those 2 mango seeds, there's clear signs of the springtail activity. I'm pretty sure that's what we're seeing. I mean, the grit that I apply when I feed is this pulverized eggshell, which is visually very similar to the appearance of springtails when they show up in your bins. I guess when I see white specks all over the feeding area, that's kind of my assumption, is that I'm observing springtails, but it might just be remains of grit from previous feedings. I'm not sure, it's hard to tell. Maybe just a combination of both. So let's get on with feeding these little guys. Once we drop in today's feeding, we'll be able to take an extra minute or two just to explore the outer edges of the bins, see how things look out there. Here and there I'm just bumping into things like this right here is the stem of a banana, making pretty nice progress. Feels pretty mushy in my hand. Even though it's still holding together as a single object, it probably isn't going to last much longer. And obviously the other leftover object that we found in each bin was the mango seed, which is the sort of thing that's going to take the worms a fair bit of time to finish breaking down. I am kind of glad to see that when I was tilling around in bin number 2 over there, the younger bin, there's another banana stem. We found the material to be pretty clumpy. I mean, not clumpy, less clumpy than I'm seeing over here. Stuff did seem like it broke apart pretty easily, and I wish that was the case over here too. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's just where we last fed. Although I don't exactly know what to expect, so I guess we'll know when we plop in today's feeding and we start exploring the other ends of the bin, the outer edges that we've not yet explored. Oh yeah, the cork, I forgot. So over here in the older of the 2 bins, the 204-day-old bin at this point, we kind of blew right past day 200 of the system being in service. This is the system that also has an experimental object in it, which is a cork. It's been getting composted in numerous systems over the years, moving from system to system as the system reaches its end and needs to be harvested and the worms need to be moved into a new location. The the cork just follows. So this system, the older one here, the 204-day-old system, I'm thinking I'm going to be leaving this system uncovered, because I'd like to see it dry. This system, I think, could continue on with the paper coverings, because the material so far feels pretty good in here. So let's proceed with feeding. I'm dropping in a little bit of my shredded paper and cardboard mix, which also includes a little bit of moisture, some water, and some leaves as well. And then down into the feeding area, I'm going to plop some of this breadcrumbs material. I think it's going to take a few feedings for that stuff to be depleted, but my mom does want that metal container back once it's been emptied of its contents. So I'll be looking to feed that stuff to a few of my bins over the next few feedings to try to do away with it. So now we've given each system so far, well, this system over here, 3 pieces of watermelon rind, and I guess we've got 4 pieces over here. So perhaps we'll go a little bit more heavy on the other food items in here besides the watermelon rind, since the second system, the younger system, is going to get 2 watermelon rinds. And then a little bit of random other stuff going into the other system, as well as 1 additional watermelon rind. Oh, you know what? Almost forgot. Let's be sure we also add a little bit of bedding as a foundation for the feeding over here in the younger bin. The younger bin is 169 days old. And as far as feedings go, the older bin has been fed 17 times. What we're doing right now is feeding number 18. And over here in the younger bin, the system's been fed 14 times, so what we're doing right now is adding feeding number 15. And then when we finish, I believe it will do the older system some good to have a chance to air out and dry out a little bit, just because of the amount of moisture I'm observing over there in the material. I guess once we've had a chance to till things around a little bit and mix things together, we'll have a better idea of what the real moisture situation is in both of these systems. Before I backfill and cover up the feeding zones, we'll go ahead and we'll drop in some of this pulverized eggshell I showed you earlier, because the worms always seem to really like their grit. It helps them break their foods down, so that's probably one of the main reasons they're so fond of this stuff. And I think we can start covering up. So why don't we use that need to cover up the feeding as a reason to scoop up some of the outskirts of the bin to see how things out there look. Here too, the material is all nice and crumbly, which is good to see. I'm not sure what we're going to see in the older bin, but the younger bin seems to be doing quite nicely as far as moisture levels go. Kind of makes me wish it was the same story in the older bin. So let's keep on with this idea of checking the outskirts of the bins. But you know what, before we check this edge that's closer to me, why don't we backfill the older system, because I'm very curious to see if we've got material over here that's just as muddy as we found in the feeding area. Sometimes the feeding area tends to get a little bit more damp just because of the fact that it's getting food, but it does seem to me like the excess moisture situation, it does seem to be throughout the bin. This is funny, I keep finding parts from my old shredder. This is just one of those divider plastics that is in between the cutting wheels, and that stuff usually ends up in my bedding and gets tossed in with my feedings. So that shredder, that poor old shredder, has already been gone for a while now, a couple months now, since it gave up its I mean, it went good for about a good year and a half. I bought it for 20 bucks used on the classifieds, but it finally gave up and broke down. But luckily I've got replacement shredders. So is this more of the same? another piece of plastic, very similar, but it seems larger. Oh, it's breaking apart. This must be some of the cabbage we fed last time. It just came back to me that one of the items that they received last time was cabbage. So, we're almost done here. We're just going to kind of indulge my curiosity by also tilling up, aerating, if you will, the edge closer to me. And the older bin definitely seems like it could use a little bit of tilling up and airing out. This might be one of my next systems here to get the treatment that I've been giving a lot of my overly damp systems, which is blowing a fan across the top of the material to help with a little bit of drying down in the bin. Because as much as the worms really enjoy the moisture, as you can see, they're everywhere in here. And perhaps the higher degree of moisture could be also prompting a little bit more reproduction in this bin, which is also a good thing. But I only want to allow that to go for a little while when I see it. In fact, to me it almost seems like, you know, the amount of time that it's just been going prior to me noticing it is sufficient. I'd like to just sort of put it to an end and start turning things around as soon as I spot it happening. Ideally, I'd be able to nip it in the bud and prevent it from happening, but I guess I need to be a little bit more vigilant and observant and not let it happen rather than needing to reverse course and correct for it later. So this bin, I think, will not be covered and will be probably left right here on the bench with the fan set up to blow across it to try to help bring its moisture level down, because I'd really like to see less stickiness and clumpiness of the material, kind of like what we're seeing here in the younger bin, just the way the material all easily flows and crumbles apart from itself as opposed to gripping together and becoming a clump. To me, it just seems like if it's loose, then the worms are able to access all of it, as opposed to parts of it that are clumping together. When that's happening, to me, it just seems like the worms are not really breaking stuff down. They're sort of traveling in between the large clumps and lumps, you know, getting whatever they can get access to. But as you saw, I mean, this system, I don't have the estimated worm count numbers in front of me, but it does just visually seem like the more damp bin, the older of the two, does seem to have a huge number of worms living in it. So I'm not sure. I'll have to check my records, maybe next time come down here prepared to share worm count estimates, or at least the estimates that we thought the systems had living in them when we launched them originally. But then I always have to assume that those numbers are ever changing as time goes on, hopefully increasing due to worms reproducing. So I've got, oh, let's not forget, we wanted to leave this one uncovered, right? So we'll just leave the paper covering that belongs to this one over on the other bin. So that's it for our check it, everyone. I'll be getting the fan set up after we're done here, and I've also got a little bit of cleaning up and putting away to take care of, but I'm not going to keep you around for that. That stuff's all boring. Before I go really quick though, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. It's always really appreciated, and if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, thanks so much for watching. Bye now.